There's a quote I often hear, and it says, when an elder dies, a library burns. Every time I hear that quote, I'm stopped in my tracks. I wonder how many libraries have been burned without ever opening the books. When our stories are not preserved, something more than memory is lost. Identity is lost. Context is lost. Healing is delayed. Stories are medicine. They free us from shame. They give language to pain. They help us understand why we're the way we are and remind us that we come from strength. Our stories are about liberation, about healing traumas from the past, and finally telling the truth. It's about breaking cycles of silence and passing on wisdom instead of wounds. We're talking about love legacy stories today. And if you have ever felt disconnected from your history, if you ever wish you could ask an elder just one more question, if you believe our stories deserve to live longer and our truth be preserved, this conversation is for you. Before we get started, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell so you know when new episodes are available, like our content, and please share your comments. We want to hear from you. Today, I have the honor of welcoming a woman whose work sits beautifully at the intersection of culture, memory, healing, and storytelling.
Yeah.
Zarinah El-Amin is a cultural anthropologist, author, and the visionary founder of the Legacy Story Keepers. I've titled our talk today, The Legacy We Can't Afford to Lose, Preserving the Soul of Our Communities.
I like that, Donna. I might have to take that. That's good.
You already use this. This is what you do on a regular basis. And I want to first just turn it over to you for a second and ask you to share a little bit about yourself. I just learned today that you are a HU grad. HU.
Right.
You know.
My name is Zarinah El-Amin. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. I went to Howard University in computer science. So my background is very technical, very systems orientated. And I think that that actually blends well with my work in anthropology. Because when we look at the community as a whole, we're looking at how are our communities growing? How are our communities evolving? And what are the systems that we need to put in place in order for our communities to keep growing? So when it comes to stories in particular, I fell into publishing, to be honest. I was doing my master's in anthropology, and at the completion of my degree, I published my master's thesis, which was a study on single Muslims. I was doing a study around single Muslims, and people were asking, what were the results of this study? What were the results of this study? And I would tell them, you can go read my thesis. And apparently that wasn't sexy enough language because they was like, chick, I don't want to read no thesis. You know what I mean? So I said, okay, well, how can I get this information into more hands without me responding to every single email that is coming through or answering every single call? And so a book I discovered is one of the most powerful tools that we have to disseminate our information, to educate our people, and to also make them think in the ways that we want to put forward, right? To put our messages forward. So that first book changed my entire life. I became a well-known, like niche speaker, and I began to do more things on bigger stages because of that first book. So that's how I fell into publishing. But in relationship to these stories and the stories in particular of our elders, it happened after I lost my parents. So that sort of changed the way I was looking at life and everything moving forward and kind of pushed me into what I am doing now, which is helping to make sure that our elders record their stories before it's too late.
Before it's too late. Absolutely. I have one regret regarding stories and it being too late. My grandmother. I didn't have a close relationship with my grandmother, but we spent holidays at her home. I remember spending the night and I have fond memories of her making the best coffee ever. But I've never asked my grandmother, and she's not here anymore. I never asked her any questions about her life, her growing up. And that is one regret I have because my mother didn't have a great relationship with her mother. She was raised by her grandmother. And so I never got the opportunity to understand my grandmother's story and to understand the dynamics between my mother and her mother. And so I understand the importance of capturing those stories. And I want to hear more about those stories, but I want to ask a question first about the preservation of these stories. Capturing stories is not just, and I saw you say this in one of your talks, it's not just recording a clip and thinking that technology will keep up with what we've added to our cell phone, or even sometimes our point and shoot cameras are not good enough. And so, what are ways to really, once a person has captured a story, how do they preserve this other than publishing a book? What ways and tips can you give individuals?
This is one of the most important aspects of what we're doing right now. And to be honest, I don't have a complete answer yet. I am still working with archaeologists, I am working with archivists to really see, okay, how can we better ensure that what we're doing today is going to be here 100 years from now, 150 years from now, 200 years from now, because I'm not just thinking in decades, I'm thinking in centuries. And so, what we have found so far is that we need to first make sure that what we're recording is in multiple formats. We cannot rely on just one format. That means whatever is available at this current time, we want to make sure that we use. So that's ebook servers, that is of course print, right? But then also making sure that it is held in multiple spaces. We're also looking at how can we partner with archival institutions, the libraries and such that have these already built-in departments where they're working on these things. How can we work in with that? Because when you think of trying to make sure that information is here long, long term, um, you have to realize that there are some people who are working on these problems day in and day out. And we also have to realize that some people who are working on these issues day in and day out don't want our information to be here centuries from
Right.
now. They want it to be erased, right? They want it to go to the wayside and for that to no longer be the truth. So, this is why it's so important for us to take this initial first step, which is where we are now, capturing our stories, making sure that we get the truth down in our own words, right? The African proverb says that the lion will always be vilified, the hunter will always be glorified until the lion can tell their own story. So we are at this place right now where we have to capture our own stories, capture our own truth, and of course, like you're saying, make sure that we put that long term. So that means multiple formats, right? That means having it in multiple digital warehouses, multiple digital servers, all of the things that we have available to us at this exact moment. But what my company is doing here at Legacy Story Keepers, we're also looking to partner with archival institutions, the ones that we trust, to make sure that
Yes.
it is here long term.
So then I want to move back. You took care of your mom and your dad. And I think I remember hearing in one of your talks that you weren't able to capture your mom's story. And so, first of all, I want to talk about, I think you also divorced. You were caring for your mom, your dad, and was it within a how much time?
That was a rough period. You know what I mean?
I can't imagine. I cannot imagine.
Yeah. When we think about phases, because for our students who are in the Legacy Story Keepers, we kind of break our lives up into phases and we look at pivotal moments that really change the trajectory of our life. And if I look at my life, my mother getting sick and subsequently passing within a year, and then my marriage dying within that same time, was definitely a pivotal moment. You know what I mean? But
Yes.
yeah, my mother, Dr. Cheryl El-Amin, may God have mercy on her soul. My mother was an only child, raised as an only child here in Michigan. And what I mean by raised as an only child is prior to my grandfather and my grandmother marrying and having my grandfather had other children, but I didn't even learn about them. I never met them or anything until I was older, much, much, much. I mean, like older, older, older. And so, as far as my mother's family, we only knew just snippets, you know what I mean? But to
Yeah.
be honest, I wasn't even concerned about it. I wasn't thinking about it. I didn't have any questions, none of that. And I was already in publishing when my mother fell ill. But when my mother passed, I was like, oh my God, I got a lot of questions. And my grandmother was already gone at that moment. And like I said, she was raised as an only child. So I'm like, who do I ask these questions to? You know what I mean? Like, oh my God. And I realized that while I was so busy helping everybody put these business books together and build their six-figure businesses with their message and all of that, which is beautiful and great, I had
Yeah.
neglected to do what was most important for me and my bloodline, which is my own mother's story, capture her ins and outs, capture her questions that she had about life, capture her lessons learned and ups and downs and stuff. I had neglected to do that. And so when my father fell ill, just so my mother got sick, passed a year, like a year, very fast. My
Hmm.
marriage was all dissolving such at the same time. So after my mother passed, my marriage was finalized, I think 5 months or something later after that, right? So all of this grief and such is happening at the same time. Fast forward a year, my father also is diagnosed with illness and
Hmm.
subsequently could not take care of himself anymore. And so we had to come in as caregivers. As you know, with all your work with end of life and such, you know everything that comes along with that, right? How it upends your entire life. But I was
Yes.
like, okay, my father said, ZB, I want you to record, my story, write a little bit more of what he had done in his life in relationship to the Muslim community in the Detroit area. And so I was like, bro, I'm tired. You know what I mean? Like I'm like trying to take care of you, make sure that everything is good and such. But of course, after knowing what I know from losing my mother, I was like, okay, we definitely, it's not an option. We definitely have to do
Right.
that. So that really is kind of how we got into the story keeping and why it's so important for me. Because like you said, you know, now that you're at our mature ages, we realize that, dang, I wish I knew more, but that opportunity, there's just a short window of time that
Yeah.
opportunity is there. And so we're in hindsight with our regret, but there are other people who are they're in that opportunity of time right now. And if they just had a little bit more knowledge, if they just knew, like, yo, this is important, you know what I mean? Like, do it, do it. Maybe we can wake up a few more of them so that they don't have to be like you and I and living on the other side with our regret.
Yeah. I often think about my younger self. I would not have known what questions to even ask my grandmother. As I stated, my mother was raised by her grandmother. And so the relationship between my mom and my grandmother influenced my view of my grandmother, influenced the dynamics of the whole relationship. One of the things when my father passed away in 2014, I didn't ask him a lot of questions either. In my undergraduate studies at the University of New Orleans, I studied death and dying, which being a death doula is like a real full circle moment. And from my past, I can see this as a calling. But when he died, he wasn't a talker. So I interviewed him when I was taking my death and dying classes, and I was so excited. I interviewed all his brothers, my mother, and I had some good questions. But there were other questions I wish I had asked my dad. And I wish my dad was more of a talker, like your father initiated the conversation about his life. My dad would have never done that. And so in your work, you help people to ask the right questions and get them comfortable with being with their elders or elders being with young people. So can you tell me a bit about how you do that? I know you
Yeah.
have a framework as well.
Yes, we teach what we call the life, story writing framework, LIFE. So that walks you through four steps in order to complete a life story effectively and thoroughly, right? But what we have to remember when it comes to life stories is that there are so many valleys and there are so many highs that people have throughout their life that many times they may have covered up some of those things that cause them pain, covered up some of those things that cause them shame.
Yes.
And when we start digging in there, asking questions and such, those feelings can arise for them, right? And so
Mhm.
they may not yet be at the place where they want to talk about everything that has happened in their life, but they also need to realize that they don't have to talk about everything that has happened in their life because they are the owners of the lock and key of their life story. They get to decide what they want to put forward and put back. But what I've noticed over the weeks, because every single week I'm talking to elders, right? Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm speaking to elders who are going through the layers of their lives. And they are having so many ahas that they didn't even realize were going to be a part of this writing process, right? So some of the questions that we help them start with are not the questions that we actually end with because it takes them time to remove some of the layers of shame, remove some of the layers of fear, and be able to look at their lives through a third person outsider point of view, right? And
Mhm.
when they remove themselves from their life, they can sort of watch it like a movie and they feel as they're better able to understand what was happening, how this character played in their life, how this decision did this and this. And so sometimes you got to give people the space to get there, right? To be comfortable with the things that they have done in their lives. So there's layers that we go through with questions. And what I found is that even the most kind of recluse people, people who don't want to share and talk and such, when they understand that they have ownership and they're in a space of trust, they're in the space of respect, right? They're in the space of non-judgment. They slowly start to melt and they slowly start to open up. But everybody's going to have some secrets that they just keep to the grave. And I let them
Oh, yeah.
know that's perfectly okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when people also realize um, that their legacy and whatever it is they are willing to share, it it's transformational to the life of a young person. Even if I could have, I really wish I could have helped my mother and my grandmother
Yeah.
by us three being, even if my mother and grandmother didn't say anything to one another, me asking the questions and they're both of them being present. I think that would
Hmm.
have been so healing. And so in many cases, as a death doula, I am a facilitator with families because even talking about end of life, when a person is aware that their life is coming to an end. It's still very difficult to have those conversations. So,
Yeah.
so thank you. So the advice is to take it slow,
Take it slow.
to create that trusting and comfortable environment, and
Hmm.
to make it clear that you don't have to share everything. Just
Yeah.
bits and pieces of information would be helpful. And I totally agree.
And I want to add one more thing to that. Sometimes the interviewer comes in with their own agenda and such, and I want you to talk about this. I want you to talk about this. I want you to talk about this. And they feel almost as if they are deserving of that story, right? Like, you got to talk about this, Grandma. You know what I mean? And they don't have to share anything, if they don't want to. Um, and I think kind of removing our ego as the interviewer is very,
Yeah.
very, very important, right? And allowing them to sit in the seat of ownership and of their story and what they want to share is extremely important. And for the interviewer to not only take it slow and such, remove the ego from it, but be patient. A lot of times especially when you're doing life stories of elders, you know what I mean? Like people who have maybe gone through some realms of dementia. They may not be, gone, but they may have early onset dementia or such. Um, or they may talk And then you feel like, oh my God, here they go off on this tangent again. Like I'm trying to talk about this question and they way over there or whatever.
Yeah.
I've seen sometimes where a lot of interviewers get very, very frustrated and they feel like the interview is I didn't even get what I really wanted, right? And this is one reason why I say take it slow. But then the other reason is why, as an interviewer, if you're going to go in that, you have to be a very active listener. You have to be able to listen to what is not being said and ask
Mm.
follow-up questions on what's not being said, right? And when you can kind of go into it and allow the conversation to flow, very much like you're doing this conversation, right? You're not just throwing, I got 12 questions on this list, and number one, number two, number three, you're allowing the conversation to flow naturally. The same thing has to occur in very good life story interviewing, right? You want to allow the conversation to flow rather than coming into it like one, two, three with your little type A notebook and da 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 da, because
Yes.
that starts to make people feel very on the spot, very guarded, and like you're going to be judging them. And nobody wants to feel like that. So that's what I would say from the interviewer's perspective.
I've actually had that experience when interviewing my mother. And creating this sense of urgency for her. Like your daughters need this information. You have to share this. Now is the time. And my mother was just here and I didn't ask her a single question. I again taking my time as a death doula, you don't know, I'm very aware of my mortality. You don't know how much time you actually have.
Yes.
However, enjoying my time with her, listening and being an active listener, listening to what she desires. We talked about relaxing and her saying she doesn't know how to relax. So we talked about relaxing and we practiced relaxing. And I didn't ask her a single interview question. And I felt very happy that what I was doing is really just developing that trust, which is the most important thing for our elders. As they get older, the most important thing in the work I do as a death doula is developing those trusted relationships, those connections, so that people are more willing to allow whatever's inside to just flow. So that is absolutely excellent advice. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I want to go back to your dad and the caretaking of your parents
Hmm.
and want to explore a bit about grief. I
Hmm.
can't, and you were going through a divorce or you were divorced, you had your parents, you're a parent, I think. Am I
Yes.
correct?
Three
So
children.
yeah, so you have a whole life of activity and obligations and responsibilities. First of all, how did you care for yourself in all of that? Were
It's
there
funny.
rituals or practices or well, yes, how did you care for yourself?
Yeah, I was just 2 weeks ago, or maybe last week, I posted on my Facebook page about the fact that I used to have a sane, like stay sane. I called it my stay sane playlist. And when I was driving my mother to appointments, or if I was by myself and it was just a time, I would find these certain songs, and these certain songs would be songs I would play over and over and over and over again, right? Kirk Franklin, Brighter Day was one of them. Ty, Intentional, like all things are happening for my good. He's intentional. These were songs that I would play like over and over and over again, right? I Like by DeBarge. That's not a, motivational song, but it's just a song that I like the beat, right? So
Yes.
music definitely, I'm a musician anyway, so I've always, kind of had that side of me. But music is definitely something that I use in order to lift my spirits when I need. So what I advocate for my people is that, meaning my clients and people who come to me for with questions, is like find whatever brings you joy. So I was very intentional on finding pockets of joy, whether it be
Yes.
a song, whether it be the moon, whether it be a beautiful sunset that just lit up the sky in pinks and oranges and purples. Like I was going to find those little moments of joy. But also, I am someone of faith. And so, leaning on my faith, realizing that, we all have tests. This happens to be my test at this moment. I am in the middle of one of my most hell on earth periods, but I have
Yeah.
to be able to look at what is the lesson that I'm supposed to be getting out of here. And I think that because I was able to stay on top of the bigger picture, it allowed me to not dissolve into sitting in my room and like rocking in the corner. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I was able to kind of stay there. But when I look back, I think for myself, that one of the saddest parts, because people ask me, well, how did the divorce and all of these things play together? And I think for myself is that I expected I would have my partner there during my most hellish on life on earth, moments.
Yes.
So to not have my partner there when I'm dealing with my mother and my father, that was definitely like, oh my God, invested 14 years into this partnership to not have a partner during this time, like that was definitely uh like a that's very interesting, type of thing or whatever. But
Yes.
yeah, staying sane, finding pockets, and then also allowing people to assist me. I am not the
Mhm.
best with asking for help, and I'm not the best with like accepting stuff,
Yeah.
gifts, things like this or whatever, right? That's actually something I'm working on because when you ask God for abundance, right? You ask God for good things, you have to be able to accept it without feelings of shame, without feelings of guilt, without feelings of, oh, you gave me this, so I got to give this back to you tenfold. You know what I mean? Like you should be
Yeah.
able to be accepting of God's blessings. And so sometimes when people have given me things in the past, I have a feeling of, ooh, like I owe them, or they're just weird things that I know about myself. But during this time, it was also a radical period of acceptance, meaning when people reached out and said, "Hey, Z, I want to send you guys some food," or "I'm just calling to check in." Um, I really appreciated those things and realizing that the world has gone on. I'm in my most hellish moment of life, but everybody else is still, clocking along. And so for
Yeah.
them to take a moment out of their life to look at what's happening in my life and see how they can assist me in some way, I think I earned a better understanding and appreciation, for people that do that. But it was a very big radical lesson of acceptance of everything.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful lesson. Tough time. I tell people all the time that love is incomplete if you don't allow or receive it. It's easy to give love. It feels good, right?
Yeah.
But to allow, uh, to accept and receive it, um,
Hmm.
that is very radical, right? That's a radical form of self-acceptance, self-care, self-love.
And then
And
now that we're talking about it, though, I realize that with our weekly sessions, like I said, I meet with our writers. Every week. And I think that one of my roles is actually to help them have a radical level of self-acceptance, right?
yeah,
Because when we're dissecting our entire lives, and like I said, we have those moments of our mistakes or our regrets, or I did this or da, and it comes wrapped in shame and fear and all of that. Like the writing process has allowed our clients and our legacy story keepers to really look at it from a third person and then be able to see like, oh, this happened, I did this, but this is where it took me, right? And I think for me personally, to see the layers that come off of them and how they progressively get lighter and lighter and just
yeah.
feel better about themselves is a very unexpected. I didn't expect that part of the business. That wasn't like, I was just like, we got to get the story. We got to get the story. I didn't really think about the internal gift that it was going to give to the elder themselves. Because you talked
Yeah.
about like the interviewing side, but I'm actually a lot of times focused on the other side, like the elder themselves writing their stories, right?
Yes.
Elder can be, some of them are like, I am not an elder, Zarinah. I'm only 61. You know what I mean? So I'm not an elder, but mature people, is I'm helping them to write their own stories, right? And
Yeah.
so it's coming with a lot of unexpected things that I didn't realize.
So what you do is you unaware, you're providing therapy in many ways. You're actually through your caring for your parents, and you're a doula. And you know what a doula does is we sit with people in community. We make sure that they're not doing the thing alone, whether it's giving birth, whether it's transitioning to the afterlife. And in life, we're doing the same thing. And you are building community, you are creating a movement, and you're helping people to free themselves because as they're writing their stories, like you said, their weights are being lifted. Trauma is being healed. They're learning so much about themselves. I recently retired and realized that I was experiencing burnout for years and didn't even know at first what burnout was. And I
Mm,
had lost myself. And
mm,
so one of the things we do also as a death doula is legacy reviews and helping people to make peace at the end of their life. And healthy people also to create meaning, because in many cases we're on autopilot, we're taking care of the kids, we're taking care of the house, we're doing all of these responsibilities, and we forget who we are.
mm-hmm,
And the exhaustion I felt with the burnout, the exhaustion wasn't just that I wasn't getting any sleep. Even if I got sleep, I woke up tired. I had brain fog, all of these things. And through the process of living life, if we don't take that time and that intention to just consider our story, even if we're not writing it, consider how far we've come, celebrate ourselves, create
yeah,
those moments of joy, then we really can lose ourselves and we don't remember our stories. We forget them
yeah,
ourselves. So I think the
absolutely.
work you're doing is so powerful, phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. And what came up for me when you were talking though is that your mom said the same thing, right? She was like, I don't know how to relax, right? And you're
Yeah.
also talking about the fact that all of these years of burnout. And so these things, like when we speak about what happens in our world and share it openly with others, then we're able to assist other folks, right? So think
Yeah.
back, like if your mom had maybe spoken about her own levels of burnout when she was in her early 40s or whatever, and you then would have been more consciously, it would have been on top of your mind a little bit more, perhaps, right? And so
Right.
it may have helped you to not go through so many years of burnout because you saw your mom and she spoke about it. It wasn't just like a
Yes.
default type of thing. So this is one of the reasons why I'm really big on like positive evolution, meaning that our societies and individuals, we're always constantly changing. We know from science that even things that look like they're static and they're not moving, like they're moving at the
Yes.
microscopic level, right? And when we are in our worlds as well, we're moving, moving, moving. But if we want to have like continuous positive evolution, not just change, I don't want to just move from here to here to back to back to back to back.
Yeah.
I want to be able to have inputs into my life that allow me to continue to move upward in a more positive evolution, standpoint. And in order for me to have that, then I have to have ahas that come in, and then I have to also make changes to what my actions are, right? And so when we're talking about life stories, our goal is when someone wants to share their life story with the others, it is with the intention of being able to contribute to someone else's positive evolution, right?
Mhm.
Like when I'm sharing whatever happened in my life, I'm hoping that by looking at the lesson, by looking at the decisions that I may have made that were good or bad, right? I can help somebody else maybe get just one little step. It might not be
Yeah.
like a whole quantum leap. It might just be one step further along, but in that way, I'm assisting them. And so I think that that's really what the power of life stories, when it's shared with others, one of the powerful things that can happen. And like we were talking about earlier, when it's done for ourselves, then one of the most powerful things is that within our own self, we're doing the healing and the evolution on our
Yeah.
individual level.
Yeah. You mentioned your mom was a doctor and your
She was a
dad.
social worker, but she went back to get her doctorate. So she was a school social worker. and did a lot of stuff. And then she went back to school to get her doctorate in, what was it, human services, something like that.
Okay. So, and your dad, I know, was an elder. I think I know, based on what I've heard you share on some of your talks. Your dad was an elder. Can you tell me a bit about your parents, your life with your parents?
So my dad was a imam of the Detroit Muslim community. So he was a founder of one of the largest masjids or mosque in the Detroit area. And if you think about founders and people who are founders of spiritual types of institutions, it's a lot of work that comes into that, right?
Yes.
Because you're not just working with you and your board like a nonprofit, like you have a lot of different layers and stuff. And so our life was really surrounded by service. My mother and my father, like we were constantly out there doing something for somebody every day, every week. It was just a default type of thing. Um, and so, yeah, I had a really great childhood. I grew up in Detroit, the Black Mecca. So I was surrounded by Black excellence. All the things they say around Detroit are funny to me because when I think about my childhood growing up, I'm like, we had a Black mayor, we had like there was no question of like excellence. I used to go down to the symphony, to the orchestra from high school. Like our high school would go down, like it was great. And so it was always for me a level of you are supposed to operate at a very high level of excellence. That's a default. And you also are unapologetic about who you are, right? So when I come in, if I have a scarf on, if I have on a long skirt and everybody else has on a mini skirt, I don't feel anything. Like I don't care about somebody like, oh, she got on that long stuff. This is me, you are you. And so I always sort of carried myself with that type of self-acceptance. But looking back, and because I do a lot of self-reflection, you can't be in my line of business and not start,
Yes.
do a lot of self-reflection. Looking back, I realized that I was born into a community that bred that in me, into a family that bred that in me. And so I don't think it just came by osmosis. It wasn't anything that I did. I just lucked up and got that. So, yeah, but those are my parents. But when my parents passed, both of them. Oh, and I guess I should say also one of the most exciting things is that just a few months ago, there was a campaign put together by other people, not myself, a campaign to have a street sign named after my father in Detroit. So,
Congrats.
and we had to go through a whole process, city council voting, layers of voting, and all of these different things. And I am happy to say that there is now going to be a street named after my father. It's going to be Imam Abdullah El-Amin, down by the corner of the mosque that he helped to found and grow. That's who I come from. I come from people that we don't just talk about it. Like we see something that needs to happen, we take action. And
Yes.
thankfully, the community has always been there, right? Like I said, I didn't put that petition together to have my father honored. That came from other people seeing the work that he did, and they wanted to honor him. So I'm extremely happy and thankful about that. And yeah, it's basically like can't be lazy. You see something that needs to happen, get up and do
And
it.
so you had the lived stories, and so important to document those because you saw them and you had the conversations with your dad, and the community can also contribute to those stories. That is beautiful. And for others, it is also important whether they've had the lived story or not, because there is a story and there's a deeper story all the time, a story we don't know. And it's so important. Just listening to you and watching how you light up or how you lit up. That is what your work does for people. And that is what sitting with your elders or sitting with someone younger, having those conversations, even if it's just, I had a recent client, a 99-year-old man, veteran, beautiful man, adopted me as his daughter. But I don't live, I'm not from this area. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, and I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I've been here for about 20 years. And he told me how this area looked back when he was a young boy. and the pictures in my head of how this place is, this is totally different than what he described, obviously. But
Mhm.
just hearing that story gave me great joy, knowing Washington, D.C., hearing people share stories of how the area where you went to school, Howard University, U Street Corridor, how all of those places have evolved to the way it is today. Just I
Yeah.
wish I could go back, and I can go back in time through the stories and revisit what the place was like. And so just looking at you're glowing as you're sharing about your mom and your dad and this beautiful legacy that they've left. And we all have this, whether our lives have been negative or positive, there is something great and something powerful and something to help us along our journey in every story.
In every story. I want to say real quick, this is a very important part because sometimes people feel as though, oh, I'm not a doctor, or I don't have a street named after me, or I don't have a big institution that I founded. So why would my story be important to capture,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And they start to minimize their own story. And what I always often tell them is that in the quietness of our lives, the daily sacrifices that we make, the decisions that we continue to go through every single moment, right? Those are things that are building up someone else's life and affect other people, right? And so when you look at a man who has been working all his life, hard at work, bringing his paycheck home, steady,
Yeah.
doing the things that
Yeah.
he needs to do to make sure that his family is stable, right? There is a lot that we learn from that. Integrity, we learn about discipline, right? We learn about focus. There's so much. And so I really have to tell people, please do not discount your own life, your own story, thinking that it has to look like a Barack Obama
Or Zarinah El-Amin.
or I ain't there yet, but hey, let's claim it. So yeah, but all of us in our regular individual, I won't say mundane, but I just want to say in our regular everyday lives is the extraordinary.
Yes.
People think that, oh,
Yes.
I'm ordinary, but actually, nah. Like, I'm thinking about my grandmother real quick. So my hold on, paternal, so my father's grandmother, so my great grandmother, right? So my great grandmother was a homemaker, and I didn't know her very much. I met her like just a few when I was like, I think maybe up to 3 or 4 or something like that. But now I know the stories of her through my aunt, mostly through my aunt. Um, but she talked about my great grandmother being a homemaker, right? She didn't go out a lot at all, but she always kept her home like tip top notch, and people would come visit there. Their home was like a safe place, right? For
Hmm.
family members, for just neighborhood folks or whatever. So somebody on the outside could be like, oh, well, why should she write her story? She was just a homemaker. She didn't even go outside that much. But yet here she was like a pillar of the entire family and the community by doing what she did best, what she actually loved, which was maintaining her home, making it a beautiful space, and allowing people to like being like a nest, a bird's nest, a
Yeah.
mother's nest or whatever. So yeah, I just want to like reiterate that because I think sometimes we start to discount ourselves a lot. A lot of us do it. A lot of us discount ourselves and think that I'm not really nothing like that. But actually, when you dissect it, you are.
And in some cases, it's learned behavior. So if your parents didn't come from a background that they're proud of, then they're
Mm,
passing that shame, they're passing that lack of integrity and pride and
yeah.
energy, they're passing that on. And so it's really important for us as individuals to take a step back, step out of ego, and look at our lives and be thankful. Like you said, you
Yeah.
found joy in those small moments. And there is always something that we can be proud of, something we can share with our parents. And in many cases, in all cases, probably, when we explore our own stories, we get to help our elders. We get to be the light for them. We get to be um, we get to be what is the phrase? Oh my goodness, I can't
I know. Well, when you said that, what I thought about was a T-shirt that says like, "I am my ancestors'
yes.
greatest prayer," or whatever.
That's the
Yeah.
phrase. That is the phrase I'm looking for. And so
Yep.
we get to be that for our ancestors, and then our ancestors in turn awaken and get to be that for us.
Yeah.
And that's how we change generational or heal from
Trauma.
generational trauma.
Yeah.
And that's how we create a beautiful legacy for our future
Yeah.
generations.
Yeah, and I do want to say, and I have one client, her name is Zarinah El-Amin Majid. So when she and I share the first two names together, which is very rare, right? But her name is Zarinah El-Amin Majid. So her first book was Your Incredible Mind. It's all about like how she learned the power of positive thinking, all of those things, right? Then she came back and she wanted to do a second book, and the second book is all about generational trauma. It's all about what happened in her family, in her bloodline, right? And so she's looking at that and examining that very, hey, this is like forward, you know what I mean? Like not trying to
Yeah.
push it underneath the rug, like going straight head on in order to heal the bloodline, right? But I want to
Yeah.
say that sometimes you may not find something that you're proud of. Sometimes you
Right.
may just find lessons. It may just be lessons that, hey, we ain't doing that no more. Like they did that, da, da, da,
Absolutely.
da, like we're cutting that off. We're not doing that anymore. But in order to even get to that space, right, for Sister Zarina, like it took a lot of acceptance, a lot of work around positive thinking, around a lot of work around turning your life around, right? Like making decisions and all of those things. And so now she's at a space where she can look at what happened in her world critically and not feel as though that's just going to be her default state, right? Like she knows she has control over the decisions and the life that she's building. So, and I have permission to share that. Like it's not like I'm sharing, I don't share the details of our client stories, but in this particular case, this is something that she's putting out, for everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes when you look back, you may not always see all good things. You just see lessons.
Yeah, yeah. And which is, like you said, it's still great because she's here, she's survived.
Yep,
She's had parents that no matter what they went through, they made sure she was taken care of, and she's here to tell the story.
absolutely.
She's the light.
Yeah.
What is a cultural anthropologist?
So anthropologist, anthro man, right? Ology, study of. So anthropologist, study of mankind. And when you look at mankind, everything that comes around like humans, we have the physical part, our bodies, we also have the thinking, our ways, our beliefs, our values, and all of those, how we show up in the world, right? All of those things. Anything you can think of that comes underneath the umbrella of mankind in all of its ways falls underneath anthropology, right? So I am a cultural anthropologist, and culture is made up of the way we believe, the way we eat, the way we think, our music, all of the things that we use to like express ourselves as human beings. So the way that I look at it is very cross-cultural. So a lot of the work that I've done over the years has been looking at similarities between different groups of people and how those come about. And one of the areas that I'm very, very interested in is spirituality, not necessarily just religion, but
Mhm.
spirituality, right? How do we see the idea of there being a creator? And if we think that there is a creator, an all omnipresent source, how do we act in the relationship to that creator? What are the different ways? So in my past life, I did a big event called the Head Wrap Expo, right? And this head wrap expo utilized head wrapping as an entryway into spirituality from a cross-cultural perspective. So I would have the Sikhs, right? They call them Sikhs, the men who wear the turbans from India, that religion from India. I would have the Orthodox Jewish women. I would have Muslims. I would have Nigerian women with the galas. I would have all of these different groups, right? We will all come together. We would show our style. So it's a beautiful event, right? We're showing our styles, but it's not just about the beauty and the fashion. It is
Mhm.
about also the meaning behind it. And so that gave us a way to have deeper conversations about spirituality, about how we show up in the world, about how we relate to one another. A lot of what I do centers around there. And it, like, you see my world map. I happen to be in
Yes.
this part of my office where I have created a hub, if you will, for helping other women to go out and explore the world, right? So since 2016, I have led women experiences to different global spaces. So I want to help people to see the world, right? But then also see themselves as we're what we're talking about, right? So it's about seeing
Yes.
the world, but then also seeing themselves. So next year we're going to Morocco again because Morocco is one of my favorite places. Is beautiful. The culture is vibrant. The food is amazing. Everywhere you look, you just see like, oh my God, oh my God, oh wow, oh wow. It's just an amazing spot. So a part of my world as well is building out and curating unique global experiences that are allowing people to step into a different world, but also see themselves at a deeper level. So that's my Enliven Your Soul. That is the name of our travel business. And then yeah, so those are like the two sides of where I'm focusing right now in my life are these legacy stories, the story keepers that we are supporting and making sure that their stories are captured, and then also exploring the world. So those are the two, if you will, sides of my bigger sides of my life.
When is the Morocco trip?
It's October 2026. So if anyone is interested, it's enlivenyoursoul.com/Morocco. Enlivenyoursoul.com/Morocco. Now, I've been doing trips since 2016. I've taken the groups to Morocco, of course, Senegal. We went to Japan. We went to Indonesia. We went to Turkey. So I've been doing, lots of trips, but my social presence does not reflect that much. So I was telling one of my VAs, like, I'm gonna have to give you guys, I have tons of footage from
Yes.
all these trips. Like
I totally
everybody
get
who's traveled. I know it's like it's a shame that it's just sitting on the storage drive and not actually
yeah.
out there. So that's one of my goals is to actually get that get that stuff out there so people can see, because the way I do travel is different. It's not, I would say I'm okay with people having very relaxing travel experiences and staying on the resort for 7 days if that's what their body needs at that time. But that's
Yeah.
not the way that this travel is. This travel is relaxing but also explorative, meaning that we're going to meet Moroccan women. We're going to learn how to cook their favorite dinners and, the
Yeah.
real natural stuff. So, yeah.
So we have that in common. I also plan group travel and curate amazing trips. But I'm actually rebranding right now because mine focus on adventure and relaxation, but also cultural experiences. But now that I am retired and I am a death doula pretty much full time, I am rebranding because I'm interested in doing a global end of life and death exploration, and I'd love to take people along. And so I'll share, but like you, I get all this footage and I do very little with it,
I
if
know.
anything at all.
Yeah, I love that concept of having some type of retreat for people to go and have a, end of life-ish, or however you frame it. I think that that's absolutely brilliant and gorgeous. And I hope that a lot of people take advantage of that. Like, I told you my father was ill. Well, before he got like really, really, really bad, it was where he couldn't walk stably. He would have to be in a wheelchair and things like that. But I took him to Jamaica, right? So it was just he and I. Our birthdays are one day apart. I'm on October 30th. He was on October 31st. So I said, okay, well, let's go to Jamaica. This was after my mother had passed. And so I said, okay, well, we'll go, to Jamaica. I'm so glad that I took him, even though it was more difficult as far as mobility and things like
Yeah.
that. But it was just such a memorable experience because when we got back a little bit, maybe a year after that, he would not have been able to
Yeah.
take that trip at all. So when you're talking about like these end of life bucket list types of things,
Yes.
I really hope that they they take you
I
up
got to
on
get
it.
my rebranding together and
Yeah.
resurface or when you talked about change earlier, I used the word a lot, dying. Like we got to die to the things that don't serve us.
Yeah.
And in order to receive or to grow or to experience something new, you got to release it. And the word I used for release is really dying. You can't hold on to it a little bit. If you got toxic relationships, abusive relationships, you can't be in those circles. If
Mhm.
you have, addiction issues, you can't be in those addiction circles. You got to die to that in order for that change, that evolution to occur. And
Yeah.
so travel is all that for me. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's really an amazing, and so sharing this to encourage others. And back to you
Now to
because you
encourage
lived in
others to go and encourage others to discover like, what do they need to die to in their world.
yes.
And I mean to bring it back to like stories and such, this is one of the things as far as the power of reflection, like looking in your life and being able to identify these things bring me joy, these things make me good, these things help me be a great human being. These things over here, I look back and I'm like, oh no, don't do that. Like
Right,
all the things that you're saying that we have to die to, you have to take the time to identify what those are in your life. And if you don't slow down a little bit, do the self-reflection, you can end up spending years and years and years not even knowing what brings me joy and what needs to die.
right.
So identifying that is extremely important. And one of the benefits that comes from doing the self-reflection that comes from writing your story out.
Yes. So I do want to encourage people to travel. Travel isn't as expensive as people think. It just requires a lot of work if you're doing it on your own. But you lived in Egypt, right? And
Yeah.
tell me about your experiences at living in other countries, if you've lived in more places than Egypt.
After Howard, where I was groomed to get a high paying job with benefits, I decided that I was going to turn my job offers down. I was in tech, right? So, we get paid pretty nicely. I was going to turn those job opportunities down and I wanted to go to Morocco first, actually, to just explore the world, right? I just wanted to see culture, go see. Da, da, da. I chose Morocco because they spoke Arabic and French, and I was like, okay, I can learn both of them at the same time. 9/11 happened, and the program I was going to join in Morocco closed, right? And so then I said, okay, well, where else can I go? I tried to apply for some other things, it didn't work out. So I went and then I applied to Egypt and then that is where I ended up. So I was there for about a year in Egypt and phew, learned so much about myself, learned so much
Yeah.
about the world, learned so much about humanity. And I think that experience is really what kind of pushed me to go back to school later for anthropology as far as all
Uh,
of the different ways that people lived and saw the world and such. I was like, okay. So yeah, Egypt was amazing. And then after that, I worked in Sierra Leone. My son right now is living and working in Senegal, so I go there frequently. And yeah, other things are just like short trips, not too long.
please tell me about what you gained and what you learned about yourself in those experiences and any solo travel experience.
A lot of times when people look at someone who's traveling like that from the outside, they want to project their fear onto the traveler, right? I'm sure you probably have received it with some of the locations that you have been in, and definitely they tried to project their fear on me when I went to Egypt because they were like, "What? You going to Egypt after 9/11? You don't know anybody over there. Like, what you gonna do?" But travel is also a trust building exercise with yourself. You learn how to rely on your intuition. You learn how to make decisions quickly when necessary. And you learn how to fall in love with yourself. Like if
Yeah.
I'm with myself, like if I don't like me, I got some work to do. You know what I mean? But one of the beautiful things that I love about travel is that it reveals to you who you are. Because when you are in a country, space, city where no one knows who you are at all, they have no clue who your mama is, who your daddy is, who your
Yes.
people is. They don't know what your real name is. You have to really understand who you are, right? Because you're going to choose what you're going to put forward. And I think that that is actually a very powerful place because so many of us have lived and created lives that are actually not ours. We are
Yes.
living reflections of what someone else expected us to be, how they think we should show up. And so when you travel, solo travel, you strip yourself away from those expectations of others and you decide 100% what it is that you're going to do, who you are, right? So just funny, like sometimes when I used to walk through Khanakhalili, which is the big market in Egypt, or if I'm working in Marrakesh, like the big square, the old world markets. I fell in love with old world markets in Egypt. But when you're
Yes.
walking through those old world markets, first of all, those people that are sales folks, like they know so much about human psychology, how to get you back into their store, how to make you buy more. Da, 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 da. Like they are some G's. So after I realized that, sometimes I would go in there and just observe, right? How do the shopkeepers talk to people? How do they know what language to say to certain people or whatever, right? So sometimes people would speak to me in Arabic if I had on a certain dress because they would assume that I was Sudanese. Other times, if I'm with my white friends from work, then they naturally spoke to me in English, right? I had two total lives in Egypt. One when I was with my Sudanese people, and then another over here when I was with my workers, with my coworkers or whatever. So all of those things, like you have to decide who you are. And I think that I love that part about being human. Like I can redesign my life if I feel like something is off. Or like one of my mentors, Dr. Viola, she always say, you gotta optimize, optimize, optimize. So I gotta identify what I need to optimize. You know what I
Yes.
mean? But I love that part about being human, that we're not set in stone. Like literally, we can change our entire life. And I've seen that so much through the work I do with the stories, through the traveling, like hearing people who were in conditions that were not favorable for them and their desired life. And they looked up and they said, you know what? This ain't working. I need to get some new information. So I have to educate myself on some new ways and I need to take some different actions. So back to your dying, die before you die, choosing what it is that you need to die off. It is one of the beautiful things. It's hard. It's hard. It's not
It
easy,
is.
but it's one of the beautiful things that I love about being human
The
overall.
singlehood book, and it's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Jihad of the Soul, Singlehood and the Search for Love in Muslim America. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have four other books.
Mm-hmm.
Can you
So
just
I
you
have
talk
a
about your five books?
Yeah, Jihad of the Soul is my anthropological study. It's an ethnographic study of singlehood and the search for love in Muslim America. So I interviewed a lot of people about trying to find love. It's a very interesting, especially now where we have all of these, gender wars and
Yeah.
such that are
Yes.
happening. It's very interesting. So that was the first, but I have another book called Ramadan Affirmations. These are some of the Muslimish books, but Ramadan Affirmations, came out of a practice that I started doing in my own life called Affirmations 365, where I would intentionally spend 5 minutes a day on just calling in love, calling in joy, calling in peace, calling in happiness, right? And it was an experiment. I heard about these affirmations. I was like, well, let me try it and see how it's going to work in my life. So I was intentionally doing it for a year. Like I would just every day. And so these Ramadan affirmations came up. Ramadan is a month of fasting for Muslims where I picked 30 different scriptures and compiled that with my work with affirmations and put out that book. So Ramadan is coming up February next year. And so that is something that people kind of use for that. Most recently, I have a book on self-publishing called The Book Power Method. And the Book Power Method is, I'm not in my success office now, but like my walls are filled with all of the different books that we've helped people to bring out,
Wow.
right? And how I have helped them was by identifying what the method was that I was going to use, and that I termed the Book Power Method. So my self-publishing book, Book Power Method, has been very good with helping people who want to learn how to publish on their own, right? They want to take control of that, but they want to do it at a certain level, not just slap stuff together. So they utilize the Book Power Method. And then the one of the last books that just came out 2 years ago is an anthology called At Their Feet. So it is a compilation of advice and stories of 50 elders. So they individually put their big story, what they wanted to share. We compiled that and put it into At Their Feet. So that one is going to be an annual project. We're going to continue to do that every year. So this is really good for people or families who don't want to do a full story, right? So like sometimes our clients will hire us to interview them and create a whole story, a whole book, on them. Sometimes they don't want that. They just want a little snippet, right? So this gives them the opportunity to be published, but to have a much lower entry point and time, commitment. Like within an hour and a half, we can get some like the essence of somebody's real story, and then that helps them to compile it down. Um, and then of course, I'm always writing. So I have another book that's coming out next year about legacy writing, right? So the specific focus that we use, our framework, the LIFE story writing framework, is going to be outlined in there. And then I'm also going to share some of the stories and lessons that I've learned over talking with hundreds of elders now and just talking to them about their lives and stories. So that's going to come out sometime next year.
So you write books for people as well, or oh, you're a ghostwriter as well?
I have a ghostwriting team. So we
That's
have a
awesome.
team. Yeah, we have a team of ghostwriters. Sometimes I do it depends on what's happening in our project life. But we have a team of ghostwriters that utilize my method, right, to interview and compile and pull out their stories, and then we write it up for them. And then I also have something called our Life Story Academy. So the Life Story Academy is for elders who want to write their own story, right? But they want to do it in a group format, and they want to do it with a structured process so that they're not all over the place dealing with writer's block and the like, right? So we have our Life Story Academy. This is all Legacy Story Keepers underneath the umbrella of Legacy Story Keepers. We have our Life Story Academy, and then we also have our ghostwriting memoir service.
Okay.
For anyone who is interested in life story work, we have a free masterclass. It's
Yes.
at legacystorykeepers.com/uh training, live training, sorry, live training. I think anybody, even if you don't want to publish your story, don't worry about that. Just look at how I can write the story, right? And that's what that masterclass teaches you, so that you don't have to try to figure out exactly what's going on. It helps to orient your mind and give you a process that if you want, you can follow that process on your own and get it done. Yes. Well, first, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to share with your audience. And I hope that at least one person here is inspired to write their story. I hope that maybe someone is inspired to go and sit at the feet of their grandmother, their uncle, or such who is in their life, just to soak in more of those lessons. You mentioned earlier that you didn't know exactly what questions to ask your grandmother when we were younger. Many of us don't, but I hope that whoever is listening here, is at least like the spark goes off that, yeah, I should go and sit at the feet of my people while I have them. And then if you are in the place where you can write your life story, make an intention to actually do that. So they can find us at Legacy Story Keepers on Instagram, on YouTube. We just launched a beautiful YouTube page that has a lot of free training. So I'm excited about that because not everybody can afford our services. And so I'm excited to have like a free place of training where they can go and get training as well. So our YouTube page is Legacy Story Keepers. And personally, Zarinah El-Amin.com is my personal website. So I look forward to hearing from anyone. You can always send us a email, legacy@legacystorykeepers.com, and we'll be happy to point you in the right direction on how to get your stories done. So thank you, and thank you to your audience.